and welcome to the Lit Lotus podcast. This is a community where we love, we inspire, and we thrive together. We are lit. This podcast is for empaths, yogis, and spiritual beings who are seeking holistic health alternatives for mind, body, and spiritual well-being. Manifest your best self through self-love, habit evolution, and the ancient wisdom of Ayurveda. I'm your host, Melinda Van Kirk, and welcome back, or welcome to the podcast if this is your first time joining. I am a wellness coach, a yoga teacher, Reiki master, artist, and I lead transformational journeys for people to find better health and wellness, and not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, mentally. We're integrating the whole, and I do this through simple habit evolution and teaching self-love and self-care techniques. And all this is following the ancient wisdom of Ayurveda and yoga. And Ayurveda, if you're not familiar with that, is yoga's sister science, and it's approaching health through your daily routine and for preventing dis-ease in the body. So it's not about treating specific diseases, although if you want to go that route, there are things out there in Ayurveda, which is not my expertise, where you can take herbal remedies and things like that. But it's really about starting with the foundations of your daily life, how you live your life, and setting yourself up to feel good in your body and just feeling like you are rebalanced, giving you more energy, reducing stress, and cooking simple foods, all this wonderfulness. If you want to know a little bit more about what I do, head on over to my website, melindavankirk.com, soon to be litlotus.me. It is not up and running yet with the new website. So just head over to melindavankirk.com. You can check out the Living Inspiration Tribe tab, which is my year-long group coaching program, and check out all the details there. And as well as my offerings tab, which has a little bit about, how you can work with me, whether it's for free with my weekly Insight Timer yoga classes and meditations, or work with me locally if you want to do a Reiki session or wellness coaching session one-on-one as well. So anyways, there's a lot of information over my webpage. So I'm not going to talk too much about that. We are going to get into today's podcast. Today's podcast is all about the ego, mind, and attachments. And so this is a really big conversation, and I'm not going to try and speak about it in super detailed ways because it's a very philosophical conversation. I have been reading Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth, and it's really fascinating, and I'm only a little bit into it, but I do highly recommend it. So far, it's amazing, some of his perspectives on the ego mind, and it makes complete sense, which sometimes you read things and you're like, yeah, I get it. But this is, for me, has been very eye-opening in terms of how our mind works. And specifically, I want to talk about the separation between what our ego mind is and what our true self is. So we are not all these things that we tell ourselves. And I know in one of the earlier podcasts, we talked a little bit about identity evolution. We're going to talk a little bit again today about identity. So thinking about what your identity is, and everyone just take a moment, think about when someone asks you something about yourself. Is anyone really asking about your true inner self? No one's coming up and being like, what are your deepest thoughts on life? Or if they are, that's pretty awesome, but I don't know if you could answer in an instant. I probably couldn't. But usually you meet somebody and you get the question of, oh, what do you do? Where do you live? Do you have kids? Like, the conversation goes on from there. It could be a lot of things, but those are pretty typical conversation starters. And it's very surface level. And then the reason we're talking about this identity is because we wrap our identities up into these things. The surface level conversation becomes who we think we are. So for many years, and I think for a lot of us, I was wrapping up my identity in my job. So at first I was a teacher. I'm an art teacher. I'm a high school art teacher. I teach ninth grade. I teach whatever. I teach this class, drawing class. I teach arts and humanities. And it was really specific. Like, to me, that was what I did, and that was who I was. And I also said I'm an artist, which took me a long time to own that. And I am an artist. Like, these things are part of my identity in some ways. But we're going to get a little bit deeper than that, because that's really not who I am. These are things that I do. So let me say that again. It's not who I am. They're things that I do. And as you proceed in life, your careers might change. I know mine did. All of a sudden, I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to do fashion design when I was a kid. I was very fixated on this idea of, like, I didn't follow my dreams. So I went back to school. I left teaching. And then I was like, I am a designer. I am a fashion designer. And talk about ego getting wrapped up in that statement. Because that's what I really wanted to be. I wanted to be the people on Project Runway that, made all the clothes and was just so amazing. And they got the accolades from everybody and everyone's so impressed. Because I thought that would make me a better person. And so I proceeded back to school and did all the things I thought I needed to do. And then I could say I was an artist because I finally got the degree that wasn't art education. It was a fine arts degree. And I did all these things to build up my ego because I thought that was creating me. I thought I was shaping who I was. And obviously in some ways it shaped who I was, and the fact that those are the things I did. I went into a career for that. But what I didn't do in my career is go into specifically fashion design. So I went into technical design, which is the part of fashion that no one really knows about. It is taking the patterns, it's fixing the samples. So somebody else sketches the design, colors it out, and they basically hand it off. And then I take it and I make it into a real thing. Well, me and the factory and the sample makers. I'll be very clear about that. It's very much a partnership. We get a sample, and then I would do the work to correct it, fit it, collaborate with the designers, make sure it was matching their vision, and then we would get it ready for production with the factories. So my ego self took a really big hit when I took that first job. I was trying so hard to get a job out of school. It was during the 2008 recession. Actually, it was 2009, 2010. But jobs were scarce at that point in time. And I had interviewed for multiple jobs at a certain company I really wanted to work at. And then this other opportunity came up to be in technical design. But man, did I want to be in fashion design. And I was good at technical design. So it ended up being my career for 10 years. But I did lose a lot of creativity in taking that job, which is beside the point right now. But what I thought I wanted to be was based on this label, and it was very much ego driven. And what I realized when I stepped away from that job and I detached myself from that was that my ego was hurt a little bit. My ego was hurt because my identity had gotten wrapped up in my work. Even though it wasn't the work that I truly wanted to do when I left school, so I thought. I don't think I would want to do that now, quite honestly, because I've learned what it's really like. But, in the moment, you feel like you know what you're talking about. And so I got really wrapped up into this concept of what I was and who I was with my job. This is something we see a lot in our lives. And so the ego mind is this mindset. It's the mind. It's not your true self. Your true self is located somewhere inside you. I always like to tap into my heart center to find my true self. This is your gut instinct. This is your intuition. This is the bliss body that when you meditate for a period of time, you begin to feel into. And the ego mind shuts off. And as Sonia Choquette calls the ego mind, it's your barking dog. So we need the ego. We need the ego to live. We're human beings in this three-dimensional world on this planet, and it's there to help us survive. But we also need to sometimes transcend the ego, or we need to quiet it down. So we don't want to go out and shoot the dog, okay? When the dog is barking, we need to train the dog. And we train the dog through our meditation practice. And we'll get into that in just a few moments. But to come back to this idea of your identity and the ego mind trying to identify itself with things in the physical world. It can also be physical objects. right? We get wrapped up in the idea of always wanting more, always needing more. I need the bigger house, I need the bigger car, then I'm going to get the boat. Then, as you gain money, if you get really rich, you're going to get the planes. You're going to get the things and things and things, but those things don't satisfy you. And I'm not saying you don't enjoy the things, but they can't be the thing to make you happy. The ego mind is telling you you need these things because you're seeing them and you want more and more and more. And that's how advertising and marketing has made itself a career now, is that it's playing on our psychology, telling us we need this thing. It might be to solve a problem that we have. It might be to look good. It might be to, be a certain way, like somebody we see on social media, they wear these clothes or they buy this makeup or whatever it is, and all of a sudden your identity is now attached to that. So maybe you want to look like this person, and they're selling you this brand of makeup or the FabFitFun box or whatever, and all of a sudden you need that thing because you feel like you're not enough and you want to be this other person or be like this other person. And that's really what social media plays on, right? It plays on our ego mind. It plays on our fears. And it's telling us always that we need more. And so it starts to equate this idea of these things in your life with who you are. And if we feel like we don't have enough stuff, that we are not enough, we feel diminished, we feel less than. And so how do we get out of that mindset? How do we release these attachments? We need to tap in to our inner selves. So when you completely let go of something, which we're not just telling ourselves, oh, I don't care, that's not important, because that doesn't work. We need to actually do the work, or at least start to recognize the attachment to the things to be able to transcend them. And our ego isn't right or wrong. So let me be really clear about that. It is an unconscious thing. And what we are doing in this process of meditation is bringing to light our true consciousness. And then to transcend the ego, or to train the barking dog, tame the barking dog, we need to take a step back, recognize like, hey, ego, I see you. Thank you for the information. I'm going to think about that, or I'm going to sit with it. Maybe not think, that's probably the wrong word. I'm going to be with the information. And then I'm going to tap into my body and who I really am inside, this innermost being. Maybe I'm going to meditate, put my hands on my heart center. I'm going to feel into it, and then ask myself, what is my next step? What is my next action? What do I really need in this situation? Do I need these things? And you'll begin to notice a shift. This idea of contentment in yoga is Santosha. It's not idly sitting back. It's not letting go of the need to do anything. But it's the idea of appreciating and accepting what we are and what we have, two separate things. And then beginning to move forward after you've taken that moment to appreciate it. So we're feeling content. And attachment in yoga is called Aparigraha. And these are all part of the Yamas and Niyamas, which are the two limbs of yoga that are very philosophical based. So things you should do, or recommended to do. I hate to use the word should. And then things to observe in your life. I'm just noting that no thing has anything to do with who you are as a person. We tend to obscure our identity with things. And even if you let go of all your possessions in this world, you go out in the woods, you become Ralph Waldo Emerson, and you just go out into a cabin. And I'm not saying that he is this person. As soon as I said that, this is going to sound a little bit off. But you become a spiritual being. And we've seen this with certain guru figures. Some that are very spiritual people, and some that are portraying themselves to be very spiritual people, but are actually driven by the ego mind. Bikram was a good example of this, if you're familiar with that whole story. But he sexually assaulted and raped many women over the years and got away with it because he became this guru figure. So that's a perfect example of how you can pretend to be this spiritually evolved being, and honestly, you're still operating from your ego self and doing horrific things to equate your identity with something else. You've made your identity larger than life, and you often see sociopathic behaviors in those instances. So just because you give all your things away, your objects, doesn't mean you've transcended the ego mind. We'll see a lot of attachments to food. Illnesses is also in this line. So when you have a diagnosis, all of a sudden your identity is this diagnosis. And I see that so much with so many people, and you might be able to relate to that, because as soon as you're given that diagnosis, you start to be like, okay, well now, I'm going to do all these things because you want to fix yourself, which there's nothing wrong with trying to get healthier and fix yourself, but it can become a fixation. I've got knee issues, and then you start to obsess on your knee issues, and then the knee gets worse, and your mind is creating negative thoughts, which chemically changes how your body reacts. Like, your thoughts become things. If you've never heard that, go read some Joe Dispenza, or that's actually from Mike Dooley, who runs tut.com, or Notes from the Universe, if you get those emails. And the whole idea is that when we think certain ways, it actually can physically change the body. So when you believe that you are a certain way, when you believe that you're this identity, you believe you need more food because it's filling some void in your life, you believe that you are attached to your illness. Let's say you have an autoimmune disorder, and all of a sudden then you become that disorder. You become the things that are around you, and you're never dealing with the actual underlying issue. And that's the ego speaking. The ego saying, I want more, I want more, I want more, because I'm not sure how to handle whatever it is that's going on in my life. And this is what I'm doing. I'm attaching my identity to these different things. I like to give myself a label. The ego loves to label, right? Because that's its way of compartmentalizing things in a way. Same as stereotyping. Loves to stereotype, because that's how our brain works. We are putting things into categories. It's not there as like it's meant to be an evil thing. The ego, again, it's not right or wrong. It's an unconscious thing. And so to transcend it, we need to bring to light. We need to bring consciousness back into the equation. And as long as your thoughts remain entangled with these ideas of like, I want this, I need this is mine, and you believe what they say, you're always going to be seeking out greater fulfillment than what you have in your life. This is true in relationships as well. A lot of times people enter relationships because that person is filling a need of the ego mind. Are you really in this relationship with a person because you love them? Or are they filling a role for you and you're attaching yourself to that person? You think that they can make you happy. And as you age, and you may have already discovered this in your life, which is great. But, for me, I'm sure I did not know this when I got married. But, we have to make ourselves happy, and no other person can make us happy. Now, that doesn't mean that behaviors and all that can't change a relationship. Behavior is very separate. But no other person can make us happy. And the same way that no other person can make us unhappy. Easier said than done sometimes, because you can be in a very hard situation. But if you are staying in that situation, as long as you still have free will and you're not stuck in jail, you need to make yourself happy. And ultimately, that is letting go of the ego mind. It's letting go of our attachments to things. And it's tapping back into our inner self, our inner knowing, our beingness, higher self, whatever it is you want to call it. Let's take a moment and just think about your body. From a very young age, especially as we get into, I'd say about the middle of elementary school, we start to identify our worth with our bodies. Specifically, I would say maybe fourth grade, we start to see it about now. I think it's gotten a little younger. Maybe for me, is about fifth grade. But we start making comparisons in weight, looks, and other physical characteristics. For some people, it's starting much earlier. If you were a heavy-set child and you got teased at age 5 for being heavy, this goes back a little bit longer for you. But we start to feel like our identity is wrapped up in our bodies. And as time goes on and we start to see physical changes, we might get even more wrapped up in this. For me, I'll share a very personal story, but when I was in, I'd say about 9th grade, I was a skinny, scrawny kid still. I hadn't really matured. I kind of shot up in height at that point, but I had not physically filled out, and all my friends had. I was the last one to get my period in 9th grade, which is pretty late. I was like 14 and a half. And so I didn't have breasts really. And I just felt so self-conscious about my body because I was always making these comparisons. And I remember really wrapping my identity around my body at that age. And thinking at 14 years old, I can't wait to get breast implants. I can't wait till I'm 18. Because I didn't feel like I was going to really have breasts at that point because I was so late in my maturity. And so my identity became wrapped up in this idea of what the perfect physical body was. And this did not change for years. I was always a pretty skinny kid. I got into my 20s. I think I put on a few pounds. For the first time in my life, I realized, okay, I'm going to have to pay attention to what I'm eating. I can't eat Twizzlers all the time and bagels and all the junk I used to eat as a child. And I still, I never had large breasts, and it really bothered me. I had this vision in my mind, just like Barbie, right? I wanted to be skinny with big boobs, which, we see that all over, especially in the United States. That's the thing, right? And I'd say back in the late 90s, early 2000s, it became a huge thing. We had Pamela Anderson, Baywatch. That was the look. There was a little period in the 90s during high school that it helped that like Kate Moss and some of these other models were in fashion because they didn't have big breasts. That actually helped me in those moments. But as I got into my 20s, I realized that I don't look right. I'm not beautiful. And I felt so bad in my body all the time. I didn't fill out tops right. I couldn't buy formal dresses that were fitted without getting them altered. I bought those little chicken cutlets to put in my bra. I was obsessed with this idea of how I thought I was supposed to look. And my entire identity was so wrapped up in this vision of how I thought I was supposed to look. So at age 25, I had come into a little bit of money with an inheritance, and I spent some of that money and went and had breast implants put in. And in the moment, it was exactly what I wanted. I felt confident. I felt more beautiful. I felt like I could wear anything I wanted. And I became really addicted to, I don't want to say fitness, but to being skinny. So there was a couple years period of my life in my mid 20s where I had this goal of weighing what I did in high school, which was probably about 10 pounds less. And keep in mind, I was already thin. So I went from a size 4 to a size 0, and I'm 5'6". And I really had this extreme body dysmorphia. I had the breast implants. I was super skinny. I was constantly working out. I would walk every day. I would go to the gym every day. I did my yoga practice every morning. It became an obsession. And my entire identity was wrapped up in this idea of what I thought I was supposed to be. But guess what? Never made me happy. I thought I was happy. There's moments I thought I was happy. But then things like depression creep back in. I would gain a few pounds over the years, and then I went on this up and down cycle. I'd gain 10 pounds every year. I'd lose 10 pounds. I'd gain 10 pounds. I'd lose 10 pounds. And this has been most of my adult life. And I became just obsessed. And my identity was wrapped up in this certain size that I needed to be. So if I hit a size 4, I would be like, oh, my pants are too tight. I need to get back to a size 2, which is insane, right? If I think about this and take a step back, this idea is crazy. But it didn't matter what other people saw me as. For me, I saw myself as this was my identity of looking a certain way, being a certain size. This is who I was. I was a fitness person. I love to, I gave myself all these labels, and I never found happiness in any of it. Not one time was there true happiness. It was imagined happiness. And it wasn't until I got deeper into my yoga practice that I started to find the stillness of the mind as I began to meditate and I began to reconnect with my body. I started recognizing, why did I change who I was? And in 2020, I had my breast implants taken out. I'm just going to live with it. And, I love me for me, and that's part of this process. And I think this is how I'm meant to be now. And me going through all this is meant to happen because that's the experience I was having in the moment. And all these hard times, all these things we go through, all the things the ego mind puts us through are experiences we need to have in order to learn and transcend and become something better, evolve. And it's all part of the journey. It's part of my path. And, my path now is learning to release the ego mind, to release the attachments, shifting my attention from my outside world to my inner self. And the biggest shift for me that's helped me release these attachments, and I'm not saying that they don't come up, because the ego mind is still there. I gain weight and the problem comes back in my brain. So when the problem comes back in my brain, I have to take a step back. And I have to ask myself, what is it that's driving me? Ultimately, I'm like, okay, I gained a couple pounds. I need to lose those pounds. What I do now is say, okay, am I taking care of my body, or am I putting excess in my body? What is the reason I've gained those couple pounds? Well, honestly, I've been drinking more wine than I usually do. And then I eat some more sweets, or I might eat a bigger meal than I usually do. Okay, so what's causing me to do those things, to eat the extra food, to drink the wine? Okay, well, there's some stress in my life that's been making me unhappy lately, and I'm not sure how to deal with it, so this is what I'm doing to deal with it. Now what? Okay, so now I've recognized the thing, and now it's time to take a step back. So when I experience the triggers, so when I want to pour a big old glass of wine with dinner, and it's not that I can't ever have wine. So let's be clear. This is not about guilt. This is not about not allowing yourself to have things. No, this is digging deeper and asking yourself, what is the driving force behind this? I know this thing isn't good for me. I know when I have a glass or two of wine, I eat dessert. I know I'm going to have probably a bigger breakfast. I'm not going to sleep well. There's a lot of consequences to that choice. A lot of negative consequences to that choice. But sometimes that ego mind is so strong, it wants that because it's filling a void. So the glass of wine is filling a void of, okay, I'm having a stressor and I don't want to deal with it, so pour yourself a glass of wine. So what I need to do then is to start uncovering the layers. What is the stress that I need to deal with? And then how do I change my behavior? The trigger's there. The short-term reward of the glass of wine is it tastes really good and it makes me feel nice and relaxed, right? That's the short-term reward. The long-term reward of not having the glass of wine is actually much greater, but because it's not an immediate response, that's where we struggle sometimes. That's where I struggle. I need the immediate response. That's what most of us do, right? That's why we make the trip to McDonald's. The fries taste so good. We know the fries aren't good for us. We don't need someone to tell us that those fries are filled with processed fats and, contribute to heart disease and all these things. We know that stuff. We're not even in denial. Most of us are like, oh, I know this is really bad for me, but it just sounds so good. And usually there's a trigger there, right? And sometimes the trigger could be, I'm starving and this is the easy choice because I didn't eat enough food today, or I'm eating dinner too late. Okay, that can easily be a trigger. Sometimes it's, I'm actually really thirsty, I just don't know it, and I think I'm hungry. That could be a trigger. And it could be something like, I've got a lot of stress in my life, and I think this is the one we can probably relate to. Something is stressing me out, and this is filling a void for me. And this void is us feeling like we're not enough. And there's a Marissa Peer video on YouTube. If you get the chance, check it out. I'll try and find it and put it in the show notes. But she has this great video on like feeling like you're not enough. And so we need to tell ourselves that we're enough, that we are worthy. These things that we're attaching ourselves to are making us feel like it's our identity and it's our enoughness, right? But really, when we're purchasing all these things, eating these foods, obsessing about weight, whatever it is, obsessing about your ailments and illnesses and disease, is you're like, I'm giving myself an identity because I don't feel like I'm enough as I am. Underneath all the layers, we don't feel worthy and we don't feel like we're enough. And I'm here to tell you, you are worthy and you are absolutely enough exactly as you are. Think back to like age 5, 4, 3, whenever you can remember. We didn't get depressed. Maybe some of us had some, extending circumstances. So let me be clear, and I apologize if that's you. But I would say if you didn't have any abusive behaviors as a child and you were raised in a loving home, and I'm not saying it would be perfect, there's no perfect home, but in general, you did not start making these attachments and comparisons of your body and who you were. We just didn't. We wanted to go outside and play. Now we might have had attachments to our toys. That was sort of the beginning of this, right? Attached to your blanket as a baby. You started getting attachments pretty young. And we felt like if we lost that toy, that was the end of the world, right? Because you attached your identity to that favorite bear, let's say, and then you left the bear at the restaurant and you couldn't get it back, and it was a horrible, traumatic experience. But losing that bear didn't change who you were. So just like, losing the things you have in your life, whether you have them or don't have them is irrelevant. It's not saying that it's bad to have things, but we're saying attaching yourself and your sense of worth to all the things that are in your life is really the underlying issue. And so let's talk about what do we do? What do you do when you recognize the trigger? And we can say, okay, I'm just going to accept who I am, right? But does it really work like that? No. You need to look at your resistance. Come back to yourself, to your beingness. You can sit on your cushion. Sometimes that doesn't work. In yoga, one of the limbs of yoga is called samadhi. That's your single-pointed concentration. And so we can come to our cushion and use that tool of single-pointed concentration. You're sitting on your cushion, you're sitting in your chair, and if you're able to do this and not driving, I invite you to do this now. Begin to feel in to your hands. Let your hands just flip up, beginning to draw awareness to the tip of your thumbs. Let's do the tip of your right thumb. Let's go one at a time. Pausing there with your breath. Take a few breaths. Notice. You feel any sensations on the tip of your right thumb. And if you need to wiggle the right thumb first, go ahead and do that. Let the eyes close, drawing your awareness inward. And then draw your awareness to the tip of your right index finger. Go ahead, give it a wiggle if you need to. And then moving your awareness to the tip of your right middle finger. Drawing your awareness to the tip of your ring finger. And drawing your awareness to the tip of your pinky finger. And feeling the tip of each finger on your right hand. What do you feel? What do you notice? Draw your awareness to the palm of your right hand. Do you notice sensations? Now just notice your left hand. Do you feel anything there? And can you begin to change and shift your awareness over to the tip of your left thumb? And again, you can give a little wiggle. Sometimes this takes a few minutes. And then the tip of your index finger on your left hand. The tip of your middle finger on your left hand. And the tip of your ring finger. The tip of your pinky finger. Notice all the fingertips on your left hand. Notice the center of your left palm. And then your entire left hand. Now notice your right hand again. Notice both hands together. And you'll start to experience, and you can keep going in the body, letting this expand out, moving through the entire body. You'll start to feel that energy. Those tingling sensations is just energy. Where your attention goes, energy flows, right? Sure, you've probably heard that before. That's the idea of the single-pointed concentration. So when you come into meditation, you focus on the breath. You focus on all these different things. It's to release the ego mind. And one of the easiest ways is when you're feeling triggered, can you stop what you're doing? Can you breathe? Can you feel into your body? You can kind of draw your concentration from your palms to your entire body, however you want to do it, but just feel into yourself for a minute or so before making the next action. And that initial focus on the self will help you to begin to release the ego mind a little bit. So you're recognizing the triggers. Look, you're already doing amazing. You're recognizing the triggers. You're looking at the underlying issue. You're feeling into your body. And then you're like, okay, what's my next action? And if you can slot in something else, like, if the trigger is I'm feeling this void in my life and I'm feeling stressed out, and right now my behavior is drinking the glass of wine, and immediately my immediate reward is it tastes really good and I relax. So think about what else you can do. What behavior can you do that will also help you relax? And if you're too wound up in the moment, maybe meditation is not the answer, but you can still stop, breathe for a minute. Maybe you're like, okay, I really want this wine, but I know if I go for a walk, that will also help me relax. Now, there can be other numbing behaviors that fill that, right? We make the choice. You can go sit down and stare at the TV. Maybe that's less damaging in the short term. But you want to find something that's still going to help you relax, so your reward ultimately is the same. Your trigger is still there, and you fill in that behavior. But before you fill in the new behavior, you need to kind of stop, draw your awareness in, and then make your next action. And then begin to release these ideas that wrapped up in who you are, and recognize that these are just things in my life. This is my ego mind talking. This is not who I am. I will not be diminished if I don't have that thing, if I lose that thing. It doesn't mean that you don't have attachment and feel sad if you lose something, or it doesn't mean the emotions go away. But then you just start to take a step back and become the observer and say, oh, that's my emotion. Thank you for, feeling this way. And I know this is going to change. This is not me forever. Our mind takes time to process. It's not instant. We wish it would just all happen instantly, right? But it takes time. There's lots and lots of neurons in there. They're used to firing a certain way. And this whole experience is just a process. I'm going to wrap up by talking a little bit about Eckhart Tolle's book again. And he talks about action with inner resistance. So when you still feel the resistance, but you're doing something because you feel like, well, this is the right choice, so I'm not going to drink the wine. I'm going to go on a walk. But if I still have this inner resistance, I'm going to stay closed. There's not going to be any universal energy on my side because I'm doing it with resistance. It's that same kind of passive-aggressive attitude, right? Like, oh, if that's fine, I'll do it. It's fine. But clearly, there's resistance there. It's not fine. But when you can take action with yielding or surrendering, it's when the universe will open up all those beautiful new possibilities. There's a new dimension of consciousness. And your actions will start to become in alignment with the whole, and it'll support you, and it'll support the intelligence of the universe, and you will open up all these new expansive opportunities in life. And I'm going to read one quote. It's on page 57 from A New Earth. The ultimate truth of who you are is not I am this or I am that, but I am. The ultimate truth of who you are is not I am this or I am that, but I am. So I've said a lot today. I know you might be processing some of this. And sitting down and journaling is going to be one of the most beneficial things when you're trying to change a certain behavior or you're trying to kind of get around something that you're struggling with. That's one of the best ways to transcend the ego mind as well. Sit down and write about it. Let the words flow. Don't worry about what's coming out. It doesn't even have to make total sense. There doesn't need to be punctuation, but just write. And usually there's some gems in there that you'll start being like, aha, there's my aha moment. This is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm eating so much at once. This is why when I'm stressed out, I naturally go and just get shitty food at the gas station. Or I go through the drive-thru. And it's not always going to be emotional, right? A lot of times it's like, I'm just used to doing it. Do I even really want this? No, my brain is just like, okay, it's time for Chipotle. It's time to go get the food. And you can stop that behavior when you start to realize, okay, do I really want Chipotle? Am I doing this because it's easy? All right, what can I do to make things better, that I make the better choice? Meaning, like, I know that this isn't the right food for me. It's not going to make me feel good later. I'm just doing it because it's easy and I don't have to think about it. So, okay, what do I do next time? Or what do I do in this moment? What else do I have in my house that's easy that I can make? I can make a salad and I can make some scrambled eggs. Just making that up. Maybe it's an odd combination. But I'm saying there's probably things you can do that might be even easier than getting in your car, driving to the restaurant, and then coming back home. How long does that take? 20, 30 minutes? You might just be able to be like, okay, I'm at my house. I can get my food made in 10 minutes. This is actually the easier choice. So thank you for recognizing that I'm just tired and that's my underlying issue here. And I just want some food. I'm hungry. My trigger is I'm hungry and I'm used to just going to Chipotle this night of the week. So now I'm going to make a different choice and I'm going to do what's simple and quick and easy for me to cook. And I'm going to feel so much better afterwards. I saved money. I feel better in my body. I'm not going to have gas and bloating later. I'm not going to get heartburn later, whatever it is. Your body may react to that food. And then the long-term rewards are what really pay off. Okay, thank you so much for joining me today. Feel free to drop me a note. You can send me a message on Insight Timer. I am on Instagram. I'm not on there very often, to be quite frank. But, I would love to hear from you. You can go to my website. Again, it's melindavankirk.com or litlotus.me and learn all about my coaching programs, as well as if you're interested in private yoga, Reiki, whatever it is. I would love to hear from you. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Sending you so much love and gratitude. And I will talk to you on the next podcast.